Gen Z Plus has absolutely no concept of embarrassment, and I can't stand it. I'm a millennial, 1991, and I would never be caught dead doing the ish they do on camera and in public. Hi again, fellas, and those were the thoughts of a millennial on the trajectory and habits of Gen Z as it stands today. Usually, this would be the part of the video where I segue into how millennials, who are only slightly older than me and grew up with a lot of the same cultural DNA as me because I'm on the older end of Gen Z, are actually cringe and lame. But to this dude's credit, they have some self-awareness about the whole thing. Ugh, maybe this is what boomers feel about us millennials and Gen Xers. And I really respect them doing that. We live in a constant cycle of old people hating whoever the youngest people are now, and younger people hating anyone older than them. Every generation grows up telling themselves they won't be so judgmental of the youth like their parents were to them, and some people really do manage to stick to that. But no generation is a monolith, so somebody somewhere is gonna continue that cycle. I am one of those people. Except when I punch down, I do it ethically. You see, I've had an idea for a Gen Alpha video about how they are already doomed, kept in the tuck for a while now, but I wanted to have some self-awareness on my own about what I was doing, like the guy in this Reddit post. I've made as many videos about my own generation, the Zoomers, being cringe and doomed, as I have any other generation. And there was a piece of advice in the comments of that post that actually gave me some pretty useful perspective. I tell my 17-year-old he is going to do stupid things and act foolishly. That's not the problem. I tell him having video proof is. And I realize they're really correct, like super right. This is the X factor, isn't it? Video proof of the stupid shit you do is what makes you vulnerable to attack well after the moment you did something dumb. When boomers were first fun to make fun of in 2019, we were usually dunking on some stuff they did and said in the modern day, not the lifestyles they led in their youth. Millennials I've really only covered in the context of them being cringe on TikTok, though there's definitely room to poke fun at them in other places too. Pinterest remains fertile ground. And even Gen X slipped under the radar until the current year when they decided to record themselves being themselves en masse for the first time. Attacking Gen Z first of all things too, man, it was unnecessary. And up until now, we, Gen Z, are the most documented generation to ever live. Gen Alpha is on track to overtake us by virtue of being in front of a dedicated screen from a younger age, but it's not a one-way street. We're still suffering from the same illness. Every little viral trend we had over the last decade exists as potential fodder to look back on and for them to make fun of us for. The reaction commentary channels of the future are going to be founded on the corpse of the weird shit you did as a high schooler. When the lobes finish developing in Gen Alpha's collective brains, they will just have plenty of shit to go at us for, and we'll deserve it to some extent. It's only right. So before I profit off making fun of them, I think it's only right we try to catalog at least some of the cringe we as Zoomers have. You know, just take some ownership of it to be good sports when some of it inevitably comes up again. This one is kind of a benign, harmless habit to have, but it also sets up some of what I'm going to say later. There's a concept I've heard tossed around and personally witnessed myself that I find particularly interesting, and that's because it's the plainest, easiest example I can point to of how people are shaped by the current world they interact with. By that, I mean if you took like a 13th century baby and brought them to the year 2000 and had them grow up like I did, minus all the diseases he doesn't have an immune system built up for, that dude's probably going to grow up to be a pretty standard Zoomer type. There is a Gen Z equivalent of the millennial pause, and if you don't know what the millennial pause is, it's a behavior quirk noticed by some vicious TikTok comment sections that when recording a TikTok or short video, millennials tend to have like half a second of silence at the start before they start talking, where with us, Gen Z tends to talk fast and without cuts. A lot of times when we're making a video, we're setting down our phone at the start of a recording, making the phone shake at the start of our videos. I've had this type of thing referenced in my editing style, like some people describe my videos as a TikTok if it was 10 minutes long. It's partly the constraints built into the popular apps of the day that created these different little habits across huge swaths of people. Like for the millennial pause, there's a running theory of where that comes from. If you used Snapchat back in the early days, you'll probably remember that you could hold down the picture button to record a video. It would usually take a second for the app to realize a video is what you wanted to record, so Snapchat users in the 2010s learned to wait a second before they started talking to make sure that the video was actually recording. There's some other things people point to as where it came from, but that's the one I personally buy into the most. It was such a standard practice that everyone did, so no one questioned it. Became built into how they interacted with social media, and it carried over to how these same people interact with other apps. For Zoomers, these days you can upload full episodes of True Detective on TikTok, but early on, the app had much stricter limits on how long videos could be. So if you were planning to go on a long-winded rant and yap about something, you had to talk fast and do so without wasting time. That is a quirk we've carried to other places since then, and I imagine when Gen Alpha becomes shaped by the conventions of whatever social media they use, they'll notice the differences and the odd behaviors we have as we become the millennials trying out the hot new thing. They will grill us for them, sometimes in good fun, others with vitriol, and will probably feel a way about it when they hit on something they aren't entirely wrong about. The cycle's gonna continue as long as there are enough young people around to keep it going. How well this video ages is one of the things I'm most excited, yet simultaneously wary of. Many of the things I talk about here have the potential to either become an Achilles heel that we get stabbed in, or they could be inherited by the next generation and mutated into something even worse than whatever our version of that thing is. One of the biggest case studies for this is how Gen Z interacts with nostalgia. I think one of the easiest examples to clown on us for is how much we seem to love the year 2016. We are going to be 80 and talking about how good of a year that was still. Don't get me wrong, 2016 had a lot of good shit. Prime Overwatch, the summer of Pokemon Go, the 2016 XXL Freshman Cypher, as well as any number of other major cultural events. I got a lot of fond memories of spectacles that happened that year, and also from personal moments. Honestly, the way we talk about 2016 might end up as its own video, but hindsight is 2020, and it's easy to remove the bad from that year on your brain now. The oldest Gen Alpha kid would have been like 6 at the time. They have no concept of why we liked that year so much. I imagine it sounds to them how 90s kids waxing poetic about Furbies and that water cup pattern sounds to us. We come off like old geezers who really haven't moved on from all the stuff from when we were young. As a percentage, we have more people romanticizing the past than any other generation before us. Some people have said that this has led to our generation's culture being a hodgepodge of recycled trends from previous decades. Gen Z's nostalgia obsession has been occasionally attributed, at least in part, to plummeting birth rates in America, as well as in many other developed nations. The average age of a person alive in the 1970s was 28. The average age now is 38. As a raw number, there are just less young people alive to potentially pave the way for new stuff to exist. So in its absence, we latch on to a lot of things that already happened, things that have already been cool and proven so in the past. But because the content we get fed is so hyper-individualized, thanks to algorithms, that determine pretty well exactly what we want to see, anything you could possibly be nostalgic for has some subset of people yearning for it. We already have motherfuckers out here nostalgic for quarantine. I don't know if that's a result of us getting out of it and the grass not feeling much greener on the other side. I can go outside, but prices are still up, people can't get jobs, Frank Ocean is still nowhere to be found, so fuck it. Bedrotting was cool, actually. Whatever came before now, regardless of how we actually felt about it at the time, has to be better than what we're doing right now. Click that nostalgia button. The pandemic was a uniquely depressing time to be alive, especially a teenager? Actually, that shit ruled. Scene culture in mid-2000s trends? Bring that shit back. It's cool now. And truth be told, it might sound like I'm saying that in a mocking tone, but I'm guilty of this on some level. Every one of us are. These niches kind of flow into a perceived need Gen Z has to put a label onto anything and everything. Some people say we have an obsession with clearly defined aesthetics or identities. We need to compartmentalize. I don't mean this in making a million new sexualities way, like, I need to define myself as this kind of queer. That's actually awesome because we get some cool pride flags out of it and shit ones that we can laugh about. I mean it in that I think the problems people have with labels when it comes to something like identity politics can actually be seen trickling out to people trying to label anything to do with their identity. Like things you're interested in, not who you want to have sex with, just hobbies. When I get in conversations like that, it almost feels the same as when people take terms meant to only be used in an academic setting and they start using them in casual conversation. I don't remember anyone calling Fruitiger Arrow by its name when it was actually an aesthetic people used widely. It was the need to give a name to the nostalgia for that aesthetic, as well as any other number of defined aesthetics. Like there's webcore for Windows XP era PC graphics, dark academia, and variants like Dark Paradise, where it's meant to be images that use a veil of darkness to create almost a calm. There's hundreds of defined things like this crawling around on the internet, all having people that truly swear by them. Sure, aesthetics like rustic have existed as a descriptor well before all of this, but the amount of shit like it that have been given their own names has drastically increased. This sort of thing affects time periods and subcultures that were thriving in their own right before the internet eventually created an easy way to access them. The web has made the surface level aspects of a lot of stuff easier to consume, but the meat of these things tends to get lost in translation. It's led to splits in communities on who actually counts as part of a subculture. One of the big ones I see is goths. The big titty goth GF talk back in like 2018 boiled it down to having a girl who is pale as shit, wears black, and has fat honkers. When there's so much more to it, it got boiled down hard. A lot of people have come to think of gatekeeping as a necessary evil for preserving the conventions of a culture, so that it doesn't turn into something that's purely vibes, just an aesthetic. Somebody draws a picture and captions it, Goth Adam Eve, and to my very out-of-touch outsider self, the outfit they drew her in vaguely resembles the notions of punk and goth and whatever else I have of them in my head. And that's even with, on some level, me knowing there are real and meaningful differences that separate all of these groups. But not being a participant in any of them, I'm not equipped to identify them. I just keep scrolling. Meanwhile, those who are actually in tune with this stuff are, quote, tweeting a drawing and decrying it as not truly goth. This happens with anything as it gets more popular, but as monoculture dies and some of these niche subcommunities grow, the perception of them in the wider public's mind gets watered down. Those who really do punk shit, or whatever it may be, may feel like the space they carved out for themselves is getting encroached on by casuals, and it can sometimes feel like they're even being pushed out of a space they helped create. I'm usually one to say that in regards to media or things you think are neat, like Sonic or My Hero Academia, you shouldn't let the behavior of a fandom ruin your enjoyment of it, even if they're notoriously bad on that level. But in like specific subcultures, it's different, because the community and shared interest in that subculture is the content. It's the entire experience. New people coming in who don't share the values inherently changes the contents of the thing you enjoy so much. There's a very good chance that this kind of behavior doesn't change one bit with the youth now. In fact, it might only get more exacerbated. Birth rates in America are not all of a sudden rising, so if there are less and less young people every cycle, the squeeze to create new culture gets tighter, and those able to answer the call to maybe push boundaries goes down as well. That said, I suspect there are patterns in how people my age specifically tend to romanticize things that I'm rushing over here, which will become more apparent talking points in the years to come. Now, on the topic of this video aging, I want to up the stakes a little bit. I want to predict some things that I think will not be staples of bullying Gen Z in the years following this video. Some of these are popular picks for making fun of Gen Z now, or what some people think will get dunked on for down the line, that I don't agree with, and others are just me spitballing. Firstly, I do not think TikTok dances are going to be as much of a sore spot as some people predict. TikTok as a whole was made fun of for it when it first started. Pretty much everybody not on the app back in 2018 was dogging all over it. It only became more of a Gen Z calling card to dunk on as the app became more generally accepted to use. Doing cringy dances in public, people getting famous for what some people consider to be nothing, and some folk even considering these activities to be a public nuisance and rude. There's some ill will you might think carries over into them dogging on us for it, but I have a question. When was the last time you heard someone make fun of Musical.ly? Whatever genre of cringe you assign to TikTok dances, Musical.ly had on steroids. One kid doing a sped up lip sync in front of his dying grandpa, or Tom Holland doing whatever this was, now being a meme just within circles of people who like Tom Holland. Hell, when was the last time you saw Charlie D'Amelio? Was the poster child of all this, and you pretty much never hear about her now. TikTok dance trends are absolutely still around, but as a thing everybody knows about, it fizzled out pretty damn fast. I just don't think it had a lasting enough negative impact to stick onto us as a stereotype worth perpetuating. It's also attached to the fact that ones that exist these days, and even back in the day, are just genuinely cool dances to watch happen. Looked absolutely crazy, and you knew in some level, I can't do that, making it a lot harder to condemn the concept of dancing on TikTok as wholly gay and lame. Another thing I don't see the younger generation getting on us for much is general brain rot. Gen Alpha is as much the audience for that stuff as we are, maybe even more so. The Rizzler has gone from a funny one-off to a figure that people my age and older genuinely like. He went on Jimmy Fallon, he stole the show, and clearly flustered, maybe even frustrated Jimmy, which is the exact type of shit I want to see new media do to old media. But like I said, Gen Alpha are the prime viewing age for brain rot. So it's likely what they consume and what we have been consuming is going to change at some point. They're going to diverge. It might have a more obvious split appear between us as time goes on. There might be a hard cutoff date when the shit we reference like Skibbity or Phantom Tax are just not in the zeitgeist anymore. Some would say it's already on its way out. Old news to Gen Alpha who have already found their next muse. And Skibbity Toilet is left behind as one of those last cultural moments Gen Z had some active participation in. Like I said, there was a lot of this type of thing I could cover. Today I went with like more broad behaviors than any individual thing, but I'm not against getting more granular. If you guys want to see something like that where I predict way more specific shit we've done that will be made fun of for, let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed, this card on screen will take you to another video like it. I'm gonna wrap this video up here. If you enjoyed, the card on screen will take you to another one like this. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss an upload. Anyways, this has been Kwite, and I'll see y'all next time.